Now, as promised, Larry Dixon's come our way. He's written this book called When Temptation Strikes, Gaining Victory over Sin. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things I appreciate about the book, not only the way it's written, which is written for the everyday guy, but it's not all about sex. Usually when people are talking about temptation, they're talking about sexual temptation.
Exactly.
That's sort of it. You're much more comprehensive in your approach, and your biblical overview is terrific. Now, that doesn't surprise me because of the nature of your work. You should really tell us what you do, first of all.
I have the privilege of teaching theology at a school called Columbia International University Seminary and School of Missions in Columbia, South Carolina. We have very large sweatshirts.
When I first saw Columbia, I was thinking of Columbia in New York, but this is a different Columbia.
This is the more important Columbia, yeah.
And you've been teaching theology for a long time.
About 20 years, in fact. I had the privilege of teaching for 9 years in Manitoba, Winnipeg Bible College, which is now Providence College.
And you're a dual citizen, I hear.
I am indeed.
Well, gee, that's terrific. Now, why did you write the book, first of all?
I love writing, and when an opportunity is given to me to write, I'm going to jump on it. And a publisher came to me and had a manuscript from someone else that presented a perspective that basically said we can reach a stage, if we know Jesus, we can reach a stage where we no longer consciously sin. And he said, we don't believe that as a publisher. Can you clean this up and let us reissue this book? And I looked at it and I said, no, you don't really want to mess with this guy's work. And then they came back to me and said, well, can you write one from a broader perspective that says we'll struggle our whole life long, but the normal Christian life is victory over sin, not perfection, but victory. So that's kind of the genesis of the whole project.
Early on in the book, you talk about some autobiographical stuff, which relates to the topic directly and indirectly. Let's take a look actually at a picture. I want to show a picture of a car crash that happened. Icy conditions blamed for the crash, and then we've got a shot here of the car. This was your son's car.
This was our son's, Brian's car, and 1997, almost lost his life. Yep.
And there's his hip. Now, it looks like there's more metal than bone in there.
Pretty much.
Because the car, obviously the collision hit him on the side. And
he was smart enough to lean over and face the collision with his hip. If he had remained upright, he would have been killed.
Right.
But there was a surgeon in Manitoba at the time who was an expert in doing this kind of surgery. Only one fellow could do it, and he was there by God's providence and was able to repair the damage, though my son will probably need a hip replacement by age 40. So,
yeah. And then we got another shot here, a very interesting one. That's your house, and that's your house.
And that's what used to be our house.
And what caused that fire?
My wife woke up a few years ago at midnight and heard a noise up in the attic that sounded like little children playing with cars. And we don't keep little children up in the attic. I mean, basement really. So she pulled the attic stairs down, and it turned out the attic fan had gone bad, but was still working. So when she pulled the attic stairs down, it was fully engulfed in flames, and the family barely got out. And we pretty much lost everything at that point, yeah.
Now, how does this apply to your topic?
I think all of us face crises, large or small. I mean, every single day of our lives, we face disappointments, we face frustrations, we face betrayal, all kinds of things that hit us. And as a believer in Jesus, I have found tremendous strength to at least have the option of responding properly. I'm not saying I always do, but with each of those crises, large or small, come many temptations. For example, with our son's accident, it would have been so easy for my wife and myself and our daughter to just fall into despair and think that somehow God had lost control on that icy day. With our house fire, we learned very, very quickly that greed can get a hold of any of us. When you lose virtually everything, you realize how tightly you were holding on to things. In fact, that very Saturday morning, we had a garage sale before the fire, and I took about 20 bags of clothing to a local charity, not knowing that 10 hours later, we'd lose everything. And even to this day, I will say to my wife, I'll ask if something survived the fire, and she'll say, no, that's in heaven with Jesus now. So it helps to have a perspective on possessions. And I think every crisis, whether it's large or small, brings temptations with it.
Okay, so this is interesting. Most people wouldn't think of a desire for more things to be a temptation. What is the strength of the temptation there?
I think that, as Jesus said, a man's life doesn't consist in the things that he possesses. And my value as a person, your value as a person, is not in what we do or what we own. Because very quickly we can lose our profession, we can poor health or whatever, and we can, as our house fire illustrates, we can lose our possessions almost in a blink of an eye. And so I think that we just need to be aware of the fact that God gives us all things richly to enjoy, but we're not to fix our hope on uncertain riches.
Well, the last year or so with the economic crisis has certainly proven that to the whole world, has it not?
Yeah.
I was speaking at a church in Dunwoody, Georgia, the Sunday after everything, all the wheels came off at the stock market last year. And I stood in front of this congregation, very affluent congregation, and I said, well, here's a third of, every one of us here has lost a third of our net worth, just like that. And I made the point, it's amazing that, first of all, we're here, and secondly, we're not bitter, and thirdly, wouldn't it have been great if last week we had given a third of our net worth to the work of the Lord around the world, instead of just losing it willy-nilly like this. The Madoff victims, some of them lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. So from one minute to the next, you can lose everything, and it really does bear witness to Jesus' words that our life does not consist. How does the near loss of a son, what's the temptation that comes there?
Oh my goodness, I think the despair, the discouragement.
The temptation to be bitter, to resent God?
Absolutely, to be angry at God, of course. And one of the things that I've been learning, Jim, is that God's big enough. He can handle my anger. He can handle my honesty. He's not a porcelain God who's going to shatter if I'm really totally honest with Him. And for me, the gift of a local church where people care about me and can listen to me, pray for me, weep with me, it's a huge, huge gift. I have a number of friends who are not yet believers in Jesus. They don't have that kind of support. And to me, it's just an enormous blessing to realize I've got God's people surrounding me who can challenge me with Scripture, listen to me complain, but at some point remind me God has not lost control. He knows what He's doing. And I was just mentioning a few minutes ago, I preached on 2 Corinthians 12, which says, Paul says, I delight in my weaknesses, in my insults, in my difficulties, in my persecutions, because when I'm weak, then I'm strong. So these hard times, I believe, show us how really shallow our own strength is and how we need something beyond ourselves to sustain us.
Now, you make the point again and again in your book how underwhelming local churches can be in terms of their affirmation and their support of fellow believers. Now, you got a church that obviously is the exception.